navigating your way to the Alps of eastern France. There is some of the River Rhone watershed catchment that extends into Switzerland, but it's not navigable. Chamonix or the Tarentaise is likely your destination, but by train only in summer, so you might be driving. French trains get booked up, you have to be organised. Travelling much of the length of France on péage roads, good quality but expensive. It adds up. It's comparable to the cost of the fuel. B roads are just that. Sat-nav increasingly takes you through Belgium and Germany. But there's a problem. Switzerland's in the way. The canton of Geneva sticks out like a sore thumb through your route. Switzerland has a vignette. The city traffic across the Geneva canton, over that famous bridge, past the big water geyser jet thing, and onto your destination of dreams. City traffic jams aren't really the problem. I've got a reluctance to pay the €40 vignette. This right to drive in Switzerland for a year. A little piece of paper. You can actually buy this online now. But you might chance it. It in itself, when you're really using your right, is a bit like an optional péage gamble that you've managed to avoid so far. You only need it if you get stopped by the police, or of course, you're going to get hammered twice if you get caught by a speed camera. I'm a magnet for speed cameras. I travel by night through France on B roads to avoid the péage tolls. But there's a next gen of speed cameras in France now, and they're definitely not highlighted with gilet jaune type safety colours like I've grown up with in Britain. At night you've got little chance of seeing them, whether they're the concrete machine bunker-like looking ones turning away from you or the technological posts. They can sneak up on you from both directions. And in Switzerland they're even more hidden and sly with their placing. But you could drive through Switzerland and risk not getting a vignette pass. So we're hugging the Swiss border, heading cross-country, away from the river valley artery, discovering the mountain town of Allues, and travelling the windy bends of those mountain roads that rock-strewn, cantilevering overhangs that make you think perhaps you should have hired a Sherpa from that remote town, but it's Mother's Day and everyone's walking around with their contributions from the florist. Or chatting outside bars if they no longer have one, in a kind of remembrance. But people have been making journeys through the Alps, making life difficult for themselves for centuries and millennia. The why for them is what really drives archaeologists, what it tells us about their lives, but I'm fairly sure that ancient peoples who've been found in the Alps and their artefacts are fairly likely to have been avoiding taxes. A fair amount of the time, perhaps persecution as well. Back in Britain, the ever-advancing residence parking zones have recently required that I pay a tax to my local council for parking outside my house. I already pay my road tax. Now I've got to pay it twice. It's like the Enclosure Acts. You know, we had the three-field system back in medieval times. The enclosure of common land. It's a common road being enclosed by little white dotted lines. I feel persecuted. A mountain pass is commonly called a col. Hikers concentrate on these to get to the peaks that they seek. When they're skiing down, not so much of a focus for stuffy archaeologists, though archaeologists are developing much more of an interest in vernacular archaeology of the people and how they lived. They're much more interested in things that happened a very long time ago that you can only just get DNA from. But now there is an app you can use online to help out archaeologists and push them a little bit. There are enthusiast hikers and people doing their thesis that go searching glaciers that shouldn't be but are thawing and revealing secrets of years gone by that have been crushed and brought down slope a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a tiny little bit, and then very slowly at glacial speed. A little bit more. They get crushed, not by the snow, but it sets, compacts, turns to rock. Is perhaps the best way of thinking of this glacial ice. But it does mean that things don't get thrown out. Things don't rot. People's things don't rot like they do down in the valley. There's no freeze and thaw. Destruction and little animals and microbes acting quite the same at 2,500 metres or more above sea level. Is it Val Thorens is 4,000 metres peak? But these melting glaciers giving up, releasing their secrets of ages past is still young archaeology. It's young history, when Rembrandt and Galileo was around. The likes of us may or may not have been recorded at any birth, death or marriage. Every autumn before new snow falls, archaeologists head for the Swiss mountains. High season for glacier discoveries where wood, leather, coins, tools, a Bible, and of course over the last 15 years human bones and pieces of clothing, repeatedly. But you as a hiker can get the app and record where you happen to encounter this stuff and help the archaeologists out. Any individual group of stuff is often strewn over a large area. It's been moved already by the ice. The archaeologists have to work fast, so how things are situated next to each other is slightly less important than the crime scene. The original incident or accident, well upstream possibly. You might find something, there may be nothing around it. I'm saying take it with you. Record where you found it and take it with you, but then it has to be preserved. Put it in an evidence bag like you poop scoop. But when you're down valley having your fondue with the family with a local Mondou's wine, stick it in the freezer until you can figure out who's going to be interested in it and contact them and get a response. This is going to take time in France. The app tells you might want to do isotope examinations. The 400-year-old remains of a recent couple found. A man and a woman who will have come from the Rhone Valley. They were equipped in a way that they will have been familiar with the mountain environment. They must have known the area somewhat. Their equipment, discovered this summer, included a wooden stick with an iron tip, a kind of precursor to today's walking poles. They probably died at an area around 1,800 metres above sea level. But you have to theorise that they were actually travelling together. It's possible their remains just coincidentally appeared simultaneously in the same moraine rock-strewn area. 800 metres of partially mummified body fragments. But dating can tell us accurately. The greater the spread, likely higher the altitude from where they were found. Even the layer of the ice doesn't really tell us all that much in time terms. They sank deeper and deeper into the ice over time, literally crushed under the pressure of the layers of snow and ice that slowly moved downhill. But they were long dead and gone by then. But this couple, too, were also travelling towards Chamonix, across the Argentière Glacier. Otzi is the famous mummy that led to the birth of the systematic scientific evaluation of ice finds. In 1985 in French-speaking Switzerland, in the west of Switzerland, there's the Theodule Pass, where a mummy from 1600 was found in Zermatt, basically. He had with him coins, a dagger, a sword, a pistol, in addition to clothing and shoes. He was a mercenary, Theodule. He was travelling as a merchant. Swiss mercenaries have a long history in France. They were the King's Guard, certainly in 1600, and going all the way back to the time of knights and the Crusades. Swiss mercenaries were eventually, after Napoleon, to evolve into what was to become the core part of the French Foreign Legion. The true grotesque horror of this story would be if Relais National, new members of the French Parliament, were to try and resurrect this regiment that birthed them as the National Front. But the Swiss Guards survive guarding the Vatican and the Pope in Rome. That's in Italy for Americans watching. In 1992, the Courchevel Glacier at the foot of Pizkitch in Albola area released the corpse of a young woman. The remains of shoes, a woolen coat, a felt hat also appeared. For about 300 years, the woman's body had remained lost in the ice. In the 1990s, Swiss archaeologists were still ignoring their glaciers. Ice-free passes and high valleys, rocky outcrops and mountain flanks, which can also be treasure troves for archaeologists, were the focus. Less organic stuff, the remains of fireplaces and crystal tools under a rocky outcrop on the Hermitage Alp at the foot of the Matterhorn, as well as clay shards from hunters dating back to about 8000 BC. Forward 10,000 years from there, in 2003 there was a summer heat wave. On a mountain pass between the cantons of Valais and Bern, the hood of a Neolithic bow turned up. A bronze needle, leather pants and shoes, a quiver, arrows and a bow. No body, but a rich trove of 900 objects from the Neolithic Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, Roman Age and the Middle Ages came to light, a range of discoveries unique within the Alpine region. The relative adversity that I put myself through to get to my Alpine destination, in comparison to most tourists, often taking day and night to get there from England, on the back roads, reveals a vernacular history to me. Building details, fountains, road layouts, hairpins, waterfalls, goat tracks are all I've ever seen of a chamois, but up on the Glacier in 2024 you will see archaeologists, geographers, glaciologists, climatologists, mathematical and historians, places where people sought paths across the eternal ice, and police search routinely human bones on the Courchevel Glacier, and separately two skeletons within a few days of each other on the Valais, modern victims claimed by the harsh environment, enabling the closing of cold cases. Archaeologists are returning as glaciers are retreating, where high ice fields under the imposing Matterhorn were in the middle of a little ice age not that long ago, forming on its edges every year. But that, by 1984, had revealed a leather-shoed man that was gradually emerging from the ice into the sun that a hiker had stumbled upon. Over a decade in the 80s and 90s, a skull with auburn hair clinging to it, the same discovery still in place. Several knives, nearly 200 coins, jewellery, glass button, bits of silk clothing, a shaving razor, a dagger, a sword, a pistol. The remains of two mules. Proximity assuming ownership here. But they're not combat weapons, so it's not a mercenary. They're fencing weapons. Ceremonial, but held by the rich. And the silk clothes were of a wealthy gentleman. There's no signs of trauma in the bones. Certainly wasn't robbed. Perhaps he fell into a crevasse, with an unfortunate change of weather. But he lifts the lid on an ancient economy that spread across the peaks of the Alps. This gentleman carried a silver pendant engraved with a cross and anointed with wax. Perhaps a religious candle. The coins were minted in northern Italy, and the weapons were manufactured in what's now Germany. There's a print from 1643 showing a caravan of merchants ascending to the Alps, pass or col. You're going to be making some tidy profit if you're scaling 15,000-foot peaks to get to the town on the other side. He who dares hawks his wares. Savoy, and the Aosta Valley were never really dead ends for the daring. Archaeologists aren't really thanking those of us burning fossil fuels for creating melty puddles where once there were ice that decomposed these organic materials in a couple of years. The putrid scent gives away their age. You might not want to put your find in an evidence bag and stick it in your freezer. In 2016, anthrax was a deadly outbreak after a frozen reindeer carcass was discovered. Some unidentifiable marmots, but no mummified mammoths as yet in the Alps, Ice Age squirrels. A 46,000-year-old roundworm came back to life. There are viruses that get released from these artefacts and meltwater, which we aren't necessarily able to deal with. As modern humans, even the mummies of ancient Egypt killed off the early explorers, didn't they? The curse of Tutankhamun. When there were glaciers, Peaks weren't quite so much peaks. The cols, the little valleys, the passes between peaks have shown a series of sticks. There's loads of ancient sticks in the cols of the European Alps. No one was there, but on no real evidence other than experiential archaeology of a vernacular nature. These sticks are likely route markers, showing the way for caravans of people year after year. But further than that, these sticks can very easily act like something of a handrail in any, and certainly blizzard-type situations where you might want to keep moving rather than get snowed in. You could use teamwork. How long is a piece of string? You don't have to have huge, long iron system, like the ironwork that makes very entertaining type of Alpine touring that was installed for the First World War initially. Have you ever laid a curb? You put a series of sticks in a line to lay a roadside curb, and you wind a string line around each stick. Just loop it round the stick. On, and then you lay your curbs to that line. Now, for a travelling caravan of people with their mules, it only really takes one or two people, one at the front, one at the end of the group of who they're route finding for, one laying the loops of twine between all the sticks across the whole mountain, and the other unlooping all the twine after the last of the group have passed. And this creates a very effective way for who the local guides probably thought as something close to useless idiots to get them through the mountain cols and to the other side. A bit like steering a pig with a board, if you've ever done it. It's difficult to believe. Pigs or gentlemen are so easily steered. I'd have been like that gentleman. He'd probably been on the guided tour once or twice before and thought, oh, I can do this for myself. Or perhaps he let go. Slipped. I wouldn't have wanted to let go of one of my donkeys, one of my mules, with almost half my riches on it. But it cost him a lot. There are, of course, more recent remains from the 1940s, people trying to escape. The racial origins aren't known. No real cause. There's bombs and exploded bombs that have been found. But aren't these lives and human details of people like us better than very good jewellery from the time that, well, Tutankhamun's mask and some of those, like Book of Krell's type pattern jewellery are very good, but I think probably a machine could probably make them better. These days, computer-aided design and laser cut. Sintering process.